What is up, YouTube? My name is Trinity and welcome to my channel, or welcome back if you've been here before. So if you haven't seen my recent community post, I have been absent for the last 2 weeks, and that's just for a couple of different reasons. This video, I have been working on it for about a month now just because there's a lot of information that goes into it. So that took me a minute, and then also I recently had to put down my cat Cuddles. You may have seen him in previous videos. He was a Siamese cat that in a lot of my earlier videos was always usually in the background. On Easter, my boyfriend and I went over to my Nana's house that's where Cuddles was staying just because our apartment here doesn't allow cats and dogs and bigger animals like that. So we visited and we got to spend time with him and he was acting fine, but he quickly deteriorated over that week, and then by the next Sunday we had to make the decision to put him to sleep. The vet that we spoke to said it was likely he had some sort of brain lesion or a mass or a tumor that was causing behavioral change, and to preserve his quality of life, we had to make the difficult choice to put him down. And as someone who has had that cat since I was 8 years old, so 13 years, I needed some time because it felt like losing a part of me, honestly. It was very difficult. So thank you guys so much for your patience, and those who kept watching even in my absence. I really appreciate you guys. So today's video, we are going to be talking about the disappearance of Alissa Turney. So like I said, this is a very long and complex case with a lot of different moving parts. In 2020 there were some recent revelations, so hopefully in the near future I can maybe give a brief update on something that happens, but until then, let's get into it. On the evening of May 17th, 2001, Sarah Turney was picked up by her father, Michael Turney, from a friend's house after school. When she got into his truck, she noticed that he was very frustrated and distracted. He asked her to call her older sister, Alissa, because no matter how many times he called her, she would not answer him. So she did. They sat there for a minute, both taking turns calling Alissa, but to no avail. When they got home, Sarah went to her sister's room to see if she was in there, and she found the normally clean room in a messy disarray, her book bag dumped out on the floor, and the phone that she and her father had been calling repeatedly was buzzing on the dresser. She also found a note that said, "Dad and Sarah, when you dropped me off at school today, I decided I really am going to California. Sarah, you said you didn't want me around. Look, you got it and I'm gone. Dad, I took $300 from you." So let's go back a little bit. Who was Alissa Turney? Who is Sarah Turney? Who is Michael Turney? Alissa Marie Turney was born on April 3rd, 1984 to Barbara and Steve Stram. Her biological father, Steve, was present and active in her early life, but when Barbara moved on and met Michael Turney, he was kind of pushed out of the picture, and Michael took over the father figure role. Michael, having 3 kids of his own, and Barbara having 2, created a Brady Bunch-esque family together. They were very blended, and that family became complete when they welcomed Sarah Turney into the world. According to Michael, they were an extremely loving family, very well blended. The words stepfather or stepdaughter were never really used in the household, and this was emphasized when he adopted Alissa at 8 years old after Barbara died of lung cancer. And the two had a very strained relationship after Alissa's mother's death. Michael claims this is because Alissa was a wild child, in his words. She could not focus, she was irresponsible. She was naive to how the world worked, and in order to protect her, he had to be very strict with her, essentially saying that he had to protect her from herself. So going back to that day in 2001, Michael had actually picked up Alissa from school that day. She apparently had asked him to because she didn't want to be in school around her boyfriend, because she was apparently planning on breaking up with him. And after he picked her out, they went out to lunch together, where they apparently got into an argument because Alissa expressed the want to have more freedom that summer, more independence, to be able to stay out later, push her curfew back, that kind of thing. And Michael did not like that at all. He said, quote, "She wanted to be able to stay out later at night and not be accountable to where she was. And I told her, as long as you're under my roof, we're going to have to check in with Daddy, because Daddy is a nervous wreck if you don't." Now, Sarah, after reading the note, she was initially under the impression that Alissa was probably just at a friend's house or something, and would be back maybe that night or in a couple days when she cooled off. She wasn't that worried about her older sister. Again, her dad had always said she is a wild child, she needs to be held accountable, that's why I'm so strict on her. So this kind of played into the delinquency or wild child nature that her dad was always describing her with. She had also talked about going to California a couple of different times apparently, which was something that a lot of kids in their area talked about, and they had an aunt in California that she expressed the want to go live with. Michael, on the other hand, was apparently in a panic from the get-go. He called all of her friends and her boyfriend and asked them if they'd seen her. None of them knew where she was. She hadn't contacted them, obviously, because she didn't have her phone. But they were also very confused because she was supposed to go to a party with them all that night. The last time her boyfriend John had seen her was when she poked her head in and said goodbye and that she was getting out of school early and that she would see him later that night, which is kind of the opposite of the reason that Michael said she wanted to get out of school, to stay away from him. Michael then reported her missing to the police, but he said that she was going to California to be with her aunt and that she had left a note. So the police didn't really see a need to look for her because apparently her parent knew where she was and she was going to a supposedly safe place and she had left a note and she was almost an adult at this point. I don't agree with their lax response on this, but the parent did call and say, I know exactly where she is. So they didn't really do anything. In the following days, no one really heard from Alissa, which was very strange because she was absolutely a social butterfly. And her friends thought it was very strange that she would just up and leave, especially, again, when she had plans just that night to be with them. About a week after her disappearance, Michael said he received a call at 5 a.m. from Alissa, and she was just kind of incoherent and very agitated and started swearing at him until she hung up after telling him to leave her alone. He said he called the police and asked if they could trace the call, and they said no for whatever reason. And then before he could dial *69 to recall the last number, he said he got another call, so it wouldn't work, and he said he didn't think it would work long distance, meaning that at the time he thought she was in California. But despite this thought that she was in California, he said he left the house and searched all of the nearby gas stations that had payphones to look for her. Obviously, she wasn't there. And from there, the trail just kind of went cold. He did sue the phone company for records about the calls that he received that day, and it turns out that the call was received from Riverside, California, from a payphone, but there wasn't really more than that could be determined. In the years after Alissa's disappearance, Sarah remembers her father being away a lot. He said he was going to California to go look for Alissa, but obviously never found her and never found any clues as to where she was. 5 years after her disappearance, so 2006, Michael Turney receives a call from a detective. Apparently in Florida, a convicted murderer named Thomas Heimer confessed to the murder of Alissa back in 2003, along with claiming he killed 21 other women, including J.C. Lee Dugard. If you don't know who J.C. Lee Dugard is, that is another true crime case that I can definitely cover in the future, but the thing is, she is still alive. Already kind of messing with his credibility considering he lied about one person he killed. The FBI decided to step in and investigate his claims more, and he did correctly identify Alissa out of a lineup of photos. So this information was passed on to Phoenix investigators, and they reopened Alissa's case. So Thomas made several claims about what he had done to Alissa that just didn't really line up with who her friends and family said she was. He said that he met her in Phoenix, Arizona, and that she was addicted to heroin at the time. So that would mean in the time since she went missing to when they met in 2003, allegedly, that she would have really gotten into heroin and never left Phoenix. Apparently they traveled together for some time until they stopped at a motel and had a sexual encounter, and then he murdered her. He noted some unusual sexual habits that she allegedly had, and then he killed her. Now, investigators asked John, as well as others who knew Alissa, about different claims that were made, and they all said this does not sound like Alissa at all, especially the sexual habits that he claimed that she had. John said, no, that doesn't sound like her at all. And then Thomas also failed a polygraph test horribly, so they determined that he was probably just one of those weird, sick fucks that like to claim responsibility for something terrible just in order to get attention and notoriety. But he was crossed off the list as having anything to do with it. But the case was already open, and in all of the interviews that investigators were already doing with people, they were starting to get a new picture of what Alyssa's life was like, and it was not a good one. First, Alyssa's story didn't really line up with what a runaway would do. Yes, she did leave a note saying that she had indeed run away, and it was determined that it was likely her handwriting, but it couldn't be determined when this note was written. So she could have gotten mad and written it after a different fight she had with her family, noting the part where Sarah said she wants her gone, where I haven't read anything that referenced a fight recent enough for that to really make sense. But anyways, it could have been written another time and then used the day she disappeared. Alissa also left her phone and all of her other possessions at home, which is usually something you would take. The $1,800 that was in her bank account at the time, despite her saying she was going to California from Phoenix, which would take some sort of money, it was never touched. Her social security number was never used, meaning that she never got a job, at least on the books if she actually did leave, and she never signed up for school. Also, a couple of things don't make sense when you think about if this was always her plan to run away. If she had planned to run away anyways, why was she stressing about having to break up with her boyfriend? And why did she tell said boyfriend and her friends that she would be at that party that night? Why get into a fight with your dad if you plan on leaving anyways? Or if she decided to leave after the fight with her dad, why not take your phone and just let your friends and boyfriend know, like, what's going on so they don't worry about you, you know? As I said before, Michael claimed that Alissa was out of control, like completely. A few weeks before her disappearance, Michael had called her Aunt Lynette, so Barbara's sister, and asked her to take Alissa for the summer because he found out she was smoking weed and he could not take it anymore. She was too much for him, he said. And the relationship between Barbara's family and Michael and the girls had kind of cooled after Barbara's death, just because the vibe I get is Barbara's family didn't really vibe well with Michael, and he seems like the type that would want to isolate his kids from anyone who had an issue with him. That's just the vibe I get. I couldn't find any information on that, but they didn't talk much. That's my point. And he called Lynette and he asked her to take her, and she said that she was under the impression that he expected her to say no. And when she said, yes, I can take her, yeah, definitely, he started to backtrack hard, saying like, no, never mind, like, I got it. Despite saying all of these things about how horribly behaved Alissa was, skipping work, being promiscuous, running around with boys, skipping school, everyone else in Alyssa's life denied that. When her boss and her teachers were asked if this was true, they said no, she was a fine student. Her best friend said she was more occupied with her social life, her boyfriend and her friends, but so were a lot of teenagers at that time. She wasn't a bad student, and she was responsible when it came to work. Her best friend said that Alissa did not have a good home life, that Michael was very invasive, always going through her things, kept her on a very short leash, very strict, needed to know everything. On top of this, Michael had an extensive security camera system outside and inside the house, including hidden cameras, such as one in a vent. He also had a passive recording system on the home phone, so he could look back on any phone calls and just listen through them. So he claims this is all for security, but from what other people said, it seemed like more of a way of keeping tabs on what Alissa was doing. Apparently, he had once taken an image from one of these security cameras of Alissa making out with her boyfriend and showed it to Sarah, kind of trying to convince her, like, see, like, this is why I need to be on top of your sister constantly. Like, she's out of control. She's not a good kid. And because Sarah, as a kid, was hearing this from her dad, she believed it. She was like, yeah, like, this is why he's so tough on her. Alissa remembers her experience being very different from Alyssa's. While Michael was always breathing down Alyssa's neck, she had a lot more freedom. Alissa wasn't allowed to go out and party, and he really got on her about drinking, which, not that you shouldn't, like, if she's a kid. But when Sarah was the same age as Alissa, he let her boyfriend move into their house and bought her a mini fridge and stocked it for her with beer. He showed her the security system, and after Alissa was gone, moved her into the master bedroom where she could essentially control the security system. And when she asked him to take the camera out of the vent, since Alissa was no longer here, he did. He even bought her one of those hidden camera detectors so she could make sure that he wasn't spying on her, essentially. Now, you might be thinking, with this security system and this passive recording system on the phone, why didn't detectives ask for video footage from the day that Alissa went missing or a recording of the phone call so they can confirm it was her. They already confirmed that it was from California where she said she was, but only Michael could say it was her. Now, Lynette says that Michael told her the cameras weren't on that day, but he told detectives that he had tried to give the tapes to police back in the day and they just did not want it. So he threw the tapes out because there was nothing on it. Even if there wasn't anything on there that could definitively tell you where she was, you could still maybe see if she was with someone, what she was wearing, if she took anything with her, like if she was in distress, all these different things, but Michael apparently just threw them out. And as for the phone recording, he said that that happened to be the only day, I guess, that it wasn't on. So he missed recording the call of his missing child, even though if I had a passive recording system and I lost a child, I would make sure that fucker was on every single day. So even if I got a little short call, I would have that as evidence to hold on to. Anyways, he followed Alissa. He was always on top of her, needed to know where she was, who she was with at all times. He followed her to work and would watch her from the parking lot, recording her sometimes, just to make sure she was there. Even though, again, her employer said that she did not skip work.
Jack in the Box.
Alyssa's best friend said that she didn't believe that Alissa would just up and disappear without finding some way to contact her friends and her boyfriend. And a lot of her friends thought the same thing. Even when her other friends found out that she had run away, they were like, okay, yeah, she probably got tired of her dad's shit, but we'll probably hear from her soon. But as months and then years went by, they started to wonder, like, what the fuck happened to her? Okay, so trigger warning for the content following the rest of this video because it is going to talk about sexual assault and other topics relating to that. Her friends and boyfriend also revealed that she had told them that Michael had tried on several occasions to sexually assault her. Her boyfriend John said to investigators, quote, "She told me one time that he tried sexually abusing her when she was younger. Her dad picked her up early from school one day driving around. I think the story was he pulled over somewhere, you know, an unoccupied area, something like a desert area, and tried fooling around with her and she got aggressive." Just hearing that should have been a massive red flag to investigators, which it was, but it wasn't even close to the end of the story. Another person interviewed said that Alissa alleged that she woke up with Michael on top of her, choking her. A teacher of Alyssa's also said that she discussed being abused, but for whatever fucking reason, this teacher did not decide to report it, which is fucking ridiculous because that is part of a teacher's job. Your students' well-being is part of your job. So that just infuriates me. Apparently, Michael had called CPS at one point and told them that if Alissa called claiming that he had assaulted her or molested her, to ignore her because she was upset and wanted a car. Apparently, Michael's nephew, I believe, named David, he stayed with the family a couple of years before Alissa disappeared, and he came home one night after everyone was asleep and decided to just put in a VHS tape and watch something. He put in one that was labeled Doolittle, but then what he saw was a video of the living room, and there was a topless young woman on the couch with her face covered in newspaper. Michael was there putting newspaper over her face. And then it flipped to another scene where another young woman, again topless, seemed to be unconscious like the first one, also her face obstructed. And David said that he believed that this was Alissa and potentially one of her friends. And he said that he packed up all of his shit that night and left and never came back. Now, Michael denies this. He claims that this family member was an alcoholic and he often drove drunk, and that's why he had to kick him out of the house. And I don't know which is correct, and obviously we'll never know for sure unless this tape resurfaces or something else happens to give us that evidence. But if this was true, again, another adult failed Alissa by not reporting it. And apparently, again, not sure how true this is, but I read it a couple of times while researching, Barbara, Sarah and Alissa's mom, could even sense there was something not right about the relationship that Michael and Alissa had, and took both Alissa and Sarah to get checked for sexual abuse when they were young. I could not find anything about test results coming back. I assume if this did happen, the results probably came back negative, because I can't imagine her staying if she knew her kids were being treated that way. But I don't know. And again, I don't even know if that happened. That is just something I read, and I felt the need to put it in here as more background.
The red button.
What?
Hit the red button now.
I don't want to. How do I record?
Hit the red button now.
I'm recording.
Sarah! Sarah! Dad's a pervert.
Yes, sir. Give me the camera now. And you're still recording. And Alissa is stupid moron.
After hearing all of this, one of the detectives on the case said, quote, "You have a potentially dangerous family secret there and a child who's never been seen again. You put those two together and you have to start looking for who would benefit from her disappearance." So in this situation, if all of these allegations against Michael Turney were true, Alissa in his eyes would be a ticking time bomb. She was going to be an adult very soon, and he wouldn't be able to keep such a short leash on her, and she could tell whoever she wanted what was going on. So there's the motive right there. Again, we don't know. We may never know for sure, but that's a lot of allegations that all go together. They paint a very coherent picture, and that's a lot of weird behavior on his part. This isn't quite related to the other things that I talked about, but this is more about the weird behavior he exhibited. A year after Alissa went missing, he sold his family car, meaning they never got to investigate the last car that Alissa was definitely in. When it came to all of these interviews, Michael was the only person in Alissa's life that would not give interviews. Now, he claims that he always agreed to interviews, but detectives and investigators never contacted him to schedule one. It even came out the day that Alissa went missing, he didn't tell anyone that he was taking her out of school early. Her little sister Sarah didn't know she was taken out of school early until years later when she found out on an episode of 2020 about Alissa's disappearance. And that's kind of when her mind started turning that maybe he could be involved. Now, again, he said that she asked to be picked up specifically because she did not want to see John in school, despite having plans to see him later and saying goodbye to him. But the whole idea that she was even planning on breaking up with John didn't make sense to people either, because they apparently had a very good relationship. They seemed very in love. They cared about each other a lot. And again, she visited him right before she left. Her last interaction with her boyfriend was, "See you later tonight." Sarah, however, remembers her father's bizarre behavior when it came to John. Apparently, he would try to instigate fights between Alissa and John, and then when they would argue, he would record it, and he tried to give these recordings to police to try to imply that he was involved in her disappearance, even though he said that he knew she ran off to California, went to California to go look for her, didn't call back a phone number because he didn't believe he could call it long distance. The police got a warrant to search Michael's house in 2008, and they actually caught him while he was walking to the mailbox. And he was armed with 2 pistols and a knife, along with 7 magazines of ammo. When they searched his phone, they found 19 additional firearms and 26 pipe bombs, as well as contracts that he had written himself and had officially notarized, saying that he did not sexually abuse Alissa, and he had her sign those. The most recent contract of that kind that they found was dated a year before she went missing. They also found a 98-page document titled The Manifesto of the Madman Martyr, in which he constructs this entire story about how a union hall that he was a part of in the 80s when he was an electrician got revenge on him for lodging a complaint by taking and murdering Alissa. He also outlined a very detailed, violent plan of how he was going to attack the union for revenge for what they had apparently did to Alissa, hence what the firearms and pipe bombs were for. Investigators who found all of this determined that he was probably only a couple days to weeks away from doing all of this, so they kind of stumbled into this plan at the exact right time to prevent it from happening. In 2010, he was sentenced to 10 years in prison for his possession of pipe bombs, as well as his plan to attack the Union Center, but he was released in 2017. In an interview, he denied having pipe bombs and said he had fireworks. He claimed he never planned to attack the Union Hall. He was going to go there and kill himself to raise awareness for Alissa's disappearance. Sarah advocated for her father for a couple years after his arrest until she saw the 2020 episode covering Alissa's case that revealed to her that he picked her up early from school and all of the abuse allegations. That's when she really started to believe that he had some hand in whatever happened to her sister. And when she asked him about it, he said that he would confess on his deathbed. Sarah believes that on that day, Michael picked Alissa up early from school and drove her out to the desert and tried to assault her like he had apparently many other times. She either fought back or threatened to tell someone or something, and he decided to kill her then and there. And having a background in law enforcement, he would probably know what to do in that situation, how to hide a body. Whether it was something that he planned to do for a while or something that he decided to do right on the spot, of course we'll never know, but he probably knew something had to give as Alissa was getting closer to being free of him. Sarah Turney has been the driving force behind her search for justice for her sister. From doing interviews to creating websites to raise awareness for Alissa to talking to content creators and asking them to share the word about her sister's story. I personally only heard about this story in 2019, 18 years after her disappearance, because Kendall Ray covered it. All of this to shine a light on a case that got ignored for so long and only got attention because some dipshit decided to lie about what happened to her. Sarah also took to TikTok, where she would take advantage of popular trends going around to, again, raise awareness for her sister. Sarah also started a podcast called Voices for Justice, and it worked. In August of 2020, a grand jury indicted and charged him with second-degree murder, and Michael Turney was arrested for the murder of Alissa Turney. As far as I could find on the internet, the trial continues to be pushed back, but hopefully Alissa and her sister and all of those close to her are close to getting some sort of closure and justice from whatever the outcome of this case is. Because they're choosing to proceed with murder charges, even though Alissa has never officially been found, which is very hard to prove without evidence that the person is even actually passed, I think that they may have some pretty compelling evidence that none of us are even aware of yet. Everyone is innocent until proven guilty, and Michael has not been proven guilty yet, but with his behavior, that is what I personally believe. And if he is found guilty, the little bit of time that he will be able to spend in jail will not even begin to come close to what he deserves. He's in his 70s now. He's not going to serve much of a sentence. But any time he spends in jail having to realize what he's done and face the consequences for it is worth it. I just want him to have to look his vile deeds in the face and admit that he did them. Not that I think he'll ever admit it, but deep down he knows he's going to have to live with that forever, and I think he would have been content to just push it all down and blame it on the union hall or her boyfriend or whoever else. But even if he never verbally admits it, this is forcing him to look at himself in the mirror. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. While my video personally doesn't add anything to the conversation, I do want to say that I hope Sarah and Alissa both get their justice. And in the comments, please keep it respectful, because these are real people we are talking about, which is why, again, another reason that true crime cases, especially this one, took me so long, is because I want to handle these discussions with the respect that they deserve. Thank you guys so much for coming back to my channel every video and watching what I have created. I appreciate all of you, and hopefully I can get back into a groove soon of uploading regular content. I appreciate you all so much. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.